I kept my mouth shut the entire drive home, not because I didn't have anything to say. I had a lot to say. I had rehearsed it in my head 100 times, actually. Every version, every word, every pause. But sitting in the passenger seat with my hands folded in my lap, watching the streetlights blur past the window, I made a choice. Not yet. Not tonight. My brother was in the back seat, drunk on cheap beer and his own sense of entitlement, laughing at something on his phone. My dad was driving. My mom kept glancing at me from the corner of her eye, probably waiting for me to cry. I didn't give her that. I just looked out the window and thought, 60 days. That's all I needed. Let me back up. My name is not important. What's important is that I'm 31 years old. I work in commercial real estate finance, and for most of my adult life, my family treated me like a liability they were stuck with, until the moment they realized I might actually be useful. My brother, I'll call him by what my dad called him, the one with real potential, is 27. He's never held a job for more than 8 months. He has a BMW he can't afford, a credit card my parents quietly co-signed without telling me, and a smile that gets him out of every single mess he's ever made. His name is Griffin, and for as long as I can remember, Griffin has been the sun that our whole family orbits around. I was never the sun. I was more like the moon, visible when useful, ignored otherwise, expected to reflect light I never got. Growing up, I watched my parents pour everything into him. The private tutoring, the down payment on his first car at 19, the loans they gave him that were never repaid and never mentioned again. Meanwhile, I put myself through college on scholarships and a part-time job at a coffee shop that smelled like burnt milk and broken dreams. I graduated with honors. I got my first job at 22. I moved out the same week. Nobody threw a party. When Griffin dropped out of community college his second time, my parents called a family dinner and said they were restructuring their support for him. My dad looked at me across the table and said, "You've always figured it out. We need to focus where there's more need right now." I nodded. I said, "Of course." I went home that night and opened a new spreadsheet. Here's what nobody in my family knew. I had been quietly buying property for 3 years. It started small. I saved aggressively, lived below my means, and bought a small duplex in a working-class neighborhood 2 hours from where I grew up. Then I bought a second property. I kept everything under an LLC I'd set up with help from a real estate attorney, a woman I'd met at a networking event who became, without exaggeration, one of the most important people in my life. Her name is Odette. She's 62, sharp as a blade, and she charges accordingly, worth every cent. By the time I was 30, I owned 3 properties outright, one with a small mortgage, all under the LLC. My personal income looked modest on paper. I paid myself a reasonable salary, kept reinvesting the rest. To my family, I was doing fine. Not great. Just fine. That was intentional. I learned early on that telling my family good news was an invitation for them to figure out how it could benefit Griffin. The moment I bought my own apartment, a 1-bedroom I loved, with a bay window and original hardwood floors, my dad asked if I'd considered putting it in a family trust. I said I'd look into it. I never brought it up again. I had also, by this point, learned to keep my address somewhat vague with my parents. They knew the neighborhood. They did not have a key. That mattered later. The call came on a Tuesday in October. My mom's voice had that particular quality it gets when something has already been decided and she's just informing me, like a press release, like I'm a stakeholder being notified after the board meeting. "Griffin's in a bit of trouble," she said. I waited. The trouble was this. Griffin had taken out a personal loan 18 months ago, $47,000, to invest in a business opportunity that had, predictably, not materialized. He'd been making minimum payments, then partial payments, then no payments. The loan was now delinquent. The lender was threatening collections. It would hit his credit. It would apparently ruin his future. "We've talked about it as a family," my mom said, "and we think the most responsible thing would be for you to help cover it." I didn't say anything for a moment. "I know you've been saving," she continued, "and Griffin is going to pay you back, obviously. But right now, he just needs Mom." I kept my voice even. "I'm not taking on Griffin's debt." Long pause. "We're not asking you to take it on. We're asking you to help. Temporarily. $47,000 is not temporary help. You have savings. I have savings that belong to me. She sighed. That sigh I've heard my whole life. The one that means I'm being selfish without her having to say the word. I just think, she said carefully, that family takes care of family. I said I'd think about it. I did not think about it. I called Odette instead. The next few weeks were strange. My family started calling more. My dad stopped by my apartment once, unannounced, with a container of leftover pot roast. He stood in my doorway looking around with an expression I can only describe as assessment, like he was mentally calculating the square footage. He asked how I was doing. I said fine. He asked about work. I said good. Then, casually, like it was an afterthought, you know, if you ever needed to liquidate something, downsize a little, you could stay with us temporarily. Save some money. I looked at him. I'm not looking to downsize, I said. He nodded slowly. Just want you to know the options there. He left. I stood in my kitchen holding the pot roast container and thought, they think I'm in trouble. They've convinced themselves I'm struggling. That's why this ask makes sense to them. In their version of reality, asking me to help pay off Griffin's debt is them throwing a lifeline, not dropping an anchor. I put the pot roast in the refrigerator. I had a long call with Odette that night. By the end of the call, I had a plan. The annual Caldwell family reunion, my dad's side, we do it every November, was already booked at my aunt's property out in Millbrook. About 40 people. It's the kind of event where everyone pretends everything is fine, and my grandmother asks me every year if I'm seeing anyone, and means it as an insult. My parents had been building to something. I could feel it. The calls were more frequent. My mom had started texting the articles about family financial planning and the importance of sibling support networks. Griffin had called me twice, once to ask how I was, once to tell me about a new business idea he had, which somehow circled around to the loan. I let it build. The week before the reunion, my dad called. He didn't ease into it this time. We need to have a real conversation at the reunion, he said, about what you're going to do to help your brother, not whether. What? Okay, I said. Let's do that. The reunion was on a Saturday. Cool. Overcast. Leaves on the ground. My aunt had strung lights across the back porch, and there was a table with cold cuts and a cooler full of beer that Griffin was working through by noon. I arrived in my own car. I wore a blazer over a white shirt. I brought a bottle of wine and a folder in my bag that nobody knew about. For the first 2 hours, I was polite. I talked to my cousins. I helped carry things inside. I watched Griffin hold court with the younger cousins, laughing, charming, and completely unbothered by the financial crater he dug for himself. It was around 2 in the afternoon when my dad gathered the immediate family, me, my mom, Griffin, my aunt, my uncle, around the porch table. The other guests were still milling around, but close enough to hear if voices raised. My dad doesn't do subtle. He never has. I want to talk about the situation, he said. We've been patient. The loan isn't going to pay itself, and Griffin needs a fresh start. He looked at me, directly at me. That means you need to liquidate something. The apartment or whatever else you have. It's time. I looked at Griffin. He was staring at the table. My mom reached over and touched my hand. We're a family, she said softly. My aunt nodded like this was all perfectly reasonable. I took a breath. You want me to liquidate my assets, I said. We want you to help your brother, my dad said. Yes. I nodded slowly. And what exactly do you think I have? Your apartment, my dad said. You could sell it, move somewhere smaller, or with us temporarily. The market's decent right now. I looked at him for a long moment, then I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. I set it on the table. I'm not selling my apartment, I said, but there is a property situation I need to discuss with you. My dad frowned. What property situation? The house in Deerfield, I said. The one you've been living in for the past 4 months? Complete silence. Let me explain. Here's what happened. 6 months prior, my parents' landlord had decided to sell their rental house, the house they'd lived in for 11 years. They were scrambling. Griffin, in a moment of theatrical generosity, had offered to find them something. What he actually did was call me and ask if I knew of any available rentals. I did. One of my LLCs owned a property in Deerfield, a 4-bedroom with a good yard, 15 minutes from their church, updated kitchen. It had been sitting between tenants. I offered it to them at below market rent. They moved in. They knew it was my rental property. They knew I was the landlord. Or they should have. Because I sent the lease. I had them sign it. I had their signatures on the document that clearly identified the LLC as the property owner and my name as the managing member. What apparently happened, and I only understood this later, was that my mom had skimmed the lease, my dad had not read it at all, and when Griffin told them, "I found you a place through someone I know," they had filled in a different story. They'd assumed it was a friend of Griffin's, a contact, someone doing them a favor. They had been living in my house for 4 months and did not know it was my house. I had figured this out about 6 weeks earlier when my mom casually mentioned the landlord as if referring to a stranger, and I realized they don't know. I called Odette. Odette told me to say nothing and document everything. So I had. "The Deerfield house," my dad said slowly. "What about it?" I opened the folder. I slid the lease across the table. "You've been renting from my LLC for 4 months," I said. "I'm the landlord. I'm the owner of that property. Here's the signed lease with both your signatures on it." My mom went very still. My dad looked at the lease. Then at me. Then at the lease again. That's not possible," he said. "It's documented," I said. "I also have the payment records, though you've been on a discounted rate I provided as a family consideration." I paused. "I'm choosing to reconsider that consideration." "What does that mean?" My aunt leaned forward. I looked at my dad. "It means that if you're going to sit at this table and tell me to liquidate my assets to pay for Griffin's mistakes, then we need to renegotiate our entire arrangement. Starting with the fact that you've been living in my property at a rate $200 below market." Griffin looked up for the first time. "Wait, you own that house." "I own that house," I said. "I own several properties, under an LLC. Which is why, when you've been telling people I should sell my apartment to help you, you didn't actually know what you were asking me to give up or what else I have. Because I don't discuss my finances with people who've never once treated my financial well-being as something worth protecting." My dad's face had gone through several colors. He landed on red. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that you've been our landlord this whole time and didn't tell us?" "You signed a lease," I said, "with the LLC name on it. The information was available." That's manipulative." "Is it?" I tilted my head. "I offered you a home when you needed one. I gave you below market rent as a family courtesy. I asked nothing in return. You've lived there for 4 months and have been simultaneously pressuring me to drain my savings for a loan your son took out without asking anyone. I'd call that generous, actually." Silence. The kind that sits on a room. My mom had her hand over her mouth. My dad started to say something. I kept going. "I'm not paying Griffin's loan," I said. "I want that to be clear. That is not something that's going to happen. Griffin took out that money. Griffin took out that money. Griffin is responsible for paying it back. That's how loans work." I looked at my brother. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the lawn chair. "I love you," I said to him. "But I've covered for you and cushioned you and been the quiet one who absorbs consequences that aren't mine for 31 years, and that is finished." I turned back to my dad. "As for the house, I'm going to need you to sign a new lease at market rate, or I'll need you to make other arrangements within 60 days. I have that in writing here." I pulled out a second document. Odette, my attorney, prepared this. There's also a section addressing the months of below market rent, which I'm not requesting back, as a gesture of goodwill. My dad stared at the paper. "You have an attorney," he said flatly. "I have a very good attorney," I said. "I've had her for 4 years. My aunt made a sound. I think it was supposed to be a laugh, but she swallowed it. My dad pushed back from the table. He stood up. For a moment I thought he was going to walk away, and I was ready for that, but he didn't. He stood there and looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. Not anger exactly, something more unsettled than that, like the floor had moved and he was still adjusting. "I don't know who you've become," he said. "I haven't become anyone new," I said. "I've always been this person. You just didn't ask." My mom didn't speak to me for the rest of the event. My dad shook hands with my uncle and pretended to be interested in something happening near the food table. Griffin sat next to me for about 10 minutes in total silence and then said very quietly, "I didn't know it was your house." "I know," I said. "That's the thing about not reading documents. That's a dig. It's a fact." He was quiet. "Then, are they actually going to have to move? Only if they don't sign the new lease, I said. The rent increase is $200 a month. It's still below the neighborhood average. They can afford it. They've just never had to think about it because someone was quietly absorbing the difference. He nodded. He didn't say anything else for a while. Then, you really own multiple properties? Yes. How? By not spending money on things I couldn't afford and investing what I saved instead of co-signing for you. He flinched. I hadn't meant it to land that hard, but I didn't take it back. The 60 days were not quiet. My mom called. My dad called. There were long voicemails full of phrases like, "After everything we've done," and "You're tearing this family apart," and my personal favorite, "This isn't how a daughter behaves." I responded to each one in writing through Odette's office, professionally, clearly. My parents signed the new lease on day 41. They did not apologize. They did not acknowledge what had happened at the reunion beyond a single text from my mom that said, "I hope you're happy." I thought about that text for a while. Here's the thing, I am, not because I won something. Not because I enjoyed the conversation at the reunion. I didn't, not really, not in the way people imagine when they picture a moment like that. There's no confetti in your chest when you finally stop shrinking. It just feels quiet, solid, like ground that's been there the whole time, and you finally stopped floating above it and put your feet down. I have 4 properties now. I have an attorney I trust completely. I have a savings rate that would make my old coffee shop coworkers cry. I have an apartment with a bay window and original hardwood floors that no one is ever going to ask me to sell. I have Griffin's number still saved in my phone. We text sometimes. Nothing deep. He got a job, a real one, in a warehouse logistics company. He's been there 7 months, which is a personal record. I don't know if he's paying the loan back. That stopped being my concern the moment I laid the folder on that table. My parents live in my house in Deerfield. They pay market rent. My LLC processes the payment automatically on the 1st of every month. My dad has never once in a year and a half mentioned real estate in my presence. My mom sends me a card on my birthday with $20 in it, which she has done since I was 8 years old. And I think she does it because she doesn't know what else to do with the distance between us. I keep the cards. I don't keep the 20. I donate it. Different place each time. There's a thing that happens when you stop waiting for people to see you clearly. When you stop performing smallness hoping they'll notice the effort, you get a lot of time back, you get your own attention back. You start to notice how much mental space you were renting out to people who weren't paying for it. I notice things now. The way the light comes through my bay window in the morning, the way my portfolio looks on a spreadsheet, clean and growing, the way my phone feels when it rings, and I don't dread it anymore. Because I know that whatever anyone asks, I'm standing on ground I built. My dad said he didn't know who I'd become. I've thought about that a lot. The honest answer is, I didn't become anyone. I just stopped pretending to be smaller than I was, so that someone else could feel bigger. That's not a transformation. That's just, finally, telling the truth, and the truth, as it turns out, fits perfectly in a folder. People always want to talk about the moment. The folder on the table. The lease sliding across to my dad's hands. The look on my mom's face when she realized. But that moment didn't come from nowhere. That moment was years in the making. Years of quiet decisions, of saying no to things that felt good and yes to things that felt hard, of watching Griffin get handed everything and deciding, somewhere deep and private, that I was going to build something nobody could take. That's the part nobody sees in a story like this. They see the reveal. They don't see the Saturday mornings I spent reading about LLC structures instead of sleeping in. They don't see the years of brown bag lunches and a secondhand couch and a savings rate that looked almost embarrassing from the outside. They don't see the phone calls with Odette where I asked the same nervous questions 3 different ways because I needed to be sure. None of that is dramatic. None of that makes a good story at a reunion. But all of it is why the story ended the way it did. I thought a lot about what my dad said, that he didn't know who I'd become. I used to let that sentence sting. Now I think it's just honest. He didn't know me because he never looked. He saw what he expected to see, the daughter who figured things out, who didn't need much, who would absorb whatever the family needed her to absorb. He built that picture a long time ago and never updated it. That's not cruelty exactly. It's something almost sadder. It's just not paying attention. And I had spent 31 years trying to be seen by people who were not looking. The thing about building something in private, Something real, something documented, something that exists on paper and in law and in the deed records of 3 counties, is that it doesn't care whether anyone is watching. The properties don't care that my family didn't know about them. The LLC doesn't care that my dad thought I was just fine. The ground you build is real, whether or not anyone acknowledges the foundation. That's the thing I'd want to hand to anyone who recognizes something in this story. Not a tactic. Not a revenge blueprint. Just this, the work you do quietly, the integrity you maintain when no one's grading it, the choices you make for your own future when everyone around you is making choices for theirs. That compounds. Not like interest on a loan, not like some guaranteed formula, but like character. It accumulates. And one day, you reach into a bag at a family reunion and pull out a folder, and the folder is just paper. But what's behind it is every single choice you made when you could have chosen smaller. Griffin texted me a few weeks ago, just checking in. We talked for about 20 minutes, nothing heavy, nothing resolved, just 2 people being careful with each other. I think that's okay. I think careful is where we are right now, and I'm not in a hurry to push past it. My parents pay their rent on the 1st of every month. My mom still sends the birthday card with the $20. I still donate it. Some things change completely. Some things stay exactly what they always were. The difference now is I get to decide which is which. That's not a victory. That's just what it feels like to finally be standing on your own ground.